Welcome to People Potential with Amanda. Thank you for listening in today. I'm your host, Amanda Flasing, and I'll be bringing on various experts to discuss empowering individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of People Potential with Amanda. Today's guest is Kevin G. Campbell. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, Amanda.
Kevin, let's just start this off with introducing yourself a bit to our audience. I know you have a long list of accolades and vast experience, but I want to make sure we cover like those highlights. And if you had to sum yourself up in one word, what would it be?
If I had to sum myself up in one word, it would be curious. I'm really driven by my curiosity and taking ideas and putting them into action. So it was my curiosity that led me to studying organizational psychology and positive psychology. In a previous work life, I was a headhunter and a technical recruiter for software companies in the Bay Area. And eventually I started working at Google at a time when they were considered the best place to work according to all the workplace lists. But I still saw a high degree of variance in terms of how happy people were in their role. And it made me decide that I wanted to go back to school to study workplace happiness and employee engagement. So I studied positive organizational psychology under the co-founder of positive psychology, a gentleman by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And then I went to work for the Gallup organization, where I became a Gallup certified strengths coach. I worked with Deloitte and was a people scientist at a startup called Cocreated. And now I'm an employee experience scientist with Qualtrics. So I combine people analytics and coaching to help organizations find and close gaps in the employee experience and in order to drive better customer experiences and improve business outcomes.
That is a mouthful and so interesting. I mean, I could ask you a million questions on each point, but let's start with the first question. And we're talking about coaches, coaching in organizations. And I know you have a lot of experience coaching yourself, receiving coaching, and also being on the more academic side of it. So what are the benefits of coaching? And what do you think of internal coaches in an organization versus external coaches?
The benefits to coaching are almost too many to list. Improvements in well-being, improvements in performance, improvements in leadership, ability and effectiveness, the degree to which somebody can, rise through the ranks within an organization. I think the biggest outcome from coaching is clarity of purpose, clarity of one's goals, what you want to do, understanding what you really want, taking an intentional perspective toward what you want, and then having an accountability partner that can be by your side to drive action. And coaching's been around for a long time, especially when it comes to executive coaching for top level leaders within an organization. But more and more, there's a need for coaching to take place at every level within an organization, whether that be through having an internal team of coaches, whether that be through partnering with another organization to provide coaching, or whether that be enabling managers and leaders to take more of a coach approach toward what they do. As an example, I worked with a large professional services company, hundreds of thousands of employees, and they had every one of their managing directors go through a strengths-based coaching session with a certified coach. And they themselves received very light coach training so that they could take a more coach-like approach with their teams. I also worked with a large financial institution that's creating a team of player coaches. So people that are either high potentials or next level leaders themselves that are being given coach training in order to create a coaching culture so that people can be more strengths oriented and drive greater performance within their teams.
What does that do to the employee experience, having this player coaches, having internal coaching within the organization, having like that strong coaching practice in smaller or larger organizations, as you mentioned?
Well, I think the biggest thing is there's an improvement in performance and there's an improvement in manager relationships and the ability to act on information. So there's some interesting research. So back in the 1970s, there was a little bit of an academic debate. And I think this is a great example of where coaching can come into play within an organization. There was an academic debate around whether or not it mattered whether the manager gives an employee his or her goals or whether those goals are created by the employee themselves. So which leads to greater performance? Individual created goals or manager created goals? I'm just curious, what do you think it is?
I would say the second, and then I would offer a third option, which is a co-created goals, given the whole strategy. But I don't know. You're
No,
opening that up
no,
to a
that's really
third option.
that's really insightful, right? So there were these two academic camps that were having these conflicting findings. And they did something that's unfortunately rare within science. They said, hey, I don't think you're making up the data. I think that what you're finding is true. I know what I'm finding is true. Let's collaborate and find out why we're coming to these different conclusions. And what they found was that the manager can create the goals and it could be just as effective as somebody else creating the goals, but they have to sell them on the goals rather than just tell them what the
Mhm.
goals are. And I think co-creation is part of that process, right? Because it's a little bit of the manager creating it, it's a little bit of the employee creating it, and you don't have to sell anybody on anything that you co-create together. So if you think about a performance conversation, right? Well, how do most performance conversations go? Like performance review, annual review conversations. It's very much centered on the organization's goals for you, where they want you to go. How are you doing relative to the expectations that we have for you? Whereas with a coach approach, what you say is, hey, this is what this means for you. These are the goals that I have for this conversation. And here's why I think that's important to you. But what's true about that from your perspective? If you have to sit through this annual review conversation anyway, and we're going to have this conversation anyway, what would you like to get out of it? Right? Beyond getting more money, is there a way that you'd like to improve? Is there something different that you'd like to see in your work? Is there something that you'd like to get better at? Are there relationships that you want to foster? Are there new skills that you'd like to learn? How can we make this a good use of time from both of our perspectives? So it's not necessarily pure coaching when it's the manager or leader doing it, but it is taking that coach-like approach to be able to co-create things and foster greater accountability and involvement as a result of it.
I'm a huge fan of continuous coaching as a manager versus the once a year annual performance review. That's for sure. But let's shift over to people analytics and how they've changed, how these analytics have changed the coaching game. So, in your experience, how have you been able to leverage people data to help your clients, to help the employee experience? And can you give us a bit of a breakdown of your process?
Yeah, so it really comes down to being able to make better judgments about subjective experiences using data and having that be an input into coaching. So if you were to ask somebody, what's your performance like as a leader? How does your team feel about you? What is it like to work for you? What is it like to work for your organization? Everyone's going to have their own perspective, and that's going to be muddied with layers of bias and heuristics and everybody's own individual filter. But when you have data on not only the operational metrics, like how long does it take your new people to ramp up, how many of your people are quitting or staying, um, what are your Glassdoor scores, what are your scores on Indeed, how effective are your salespeople after going through a training, and then you layer in the experiential subjective metrics. Do people feel like they belong after they go through your onboarding process? Are people on your team emotionally and psychologically connected to you and to your workplace? And when you bring these insights together, you're no longer just making an educated guess on where you need to improve or how people feel, but you can start to measure the impact of your coaching over time and measure the impact of even your own subjective experience, right? Well, one of the beautiful things about positive psychology and the field of organizational psychology more broadly is that we have all these beautiful instruments, surveys that are validated and you can use to measure how well you're doing. So you can take some of these so-called soft things like happiness or life satisfaction or sense of purpose, and you can use validated instruments to say, Amanda, how satisfied with you are how satisfied are you with your leadership potential right now? How satisfied are you with your ability to capitalize and use your strengths? Do you feel like you have a sense of purpose in your work? And if you're after those things and you want to know those things, you can actually quantify that and then see where you rank relative to other people and start to move the needle through different practices. So yeah, there's a lot of things that in there in ways that you can use people analytics and coaches and how it's people analytics and coaching and how it's really changed the game.
I mean, having access to this data, which wasn't perhaps possible in the past. Now there's all kinds of technologies, like so easy to use, affordable for any different types of companies. You can really get to measure, as you were saying, the progress of something that was before more soft and less quantifiable. Well, you could see through time, am I moving the needle on that for myself or with my team, and have all these cool visuals. So I'm a fan.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think that's where coaching comes in too, right? Because sometimes people think of coaching as being very different from people analytics, but the power of bringing the two together unlocks so much that you can't do with one or the other independently, right? So all the dashboards and visualizations and tracking and measurement is beautiful and it's great. And I'm all for it. I build those dashboards. I help people build those systems. It's my full-time role, but it means nothing until that data gets acted upon. And sometimes for some organizations, too many organizations, in fact, there's an overemphasis on understanding and measurement and not enough goes into taking action and making improvements. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you have people that are great at coaching and you have people that want to take action on everything and they're moving fast and they're breaking things, but they're not necessarily evaluating the impact of those actions. And they may not necessarily be taking the actions that are going to yield the best return on their investment in their time. So the data helps you focus and know where to go and helps you see how you're doing relative to where you were. And the coaching is what enables you to have that emotional impact to move forward and be accountable and actually drive things and try things out.
Yeah, absolutely. That accountability is a huge factor. So I think what you're talking about is, you're merging that employee engagement, performance management programs with coaching. So the data and the coaching together is the secret to success. Um, And let's you gave a really great presentation at Converge, and there was some interesting data in there where you said that most employers, around 70%, claim that they do regularly coach their employees, but then only a small portion of leaders, 11%, actually did the coaching. So what is happening here? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with whether or not a coaching program exists or there's some sort of organizational initiative around something. But the participation and activation of that initiative is where things start to fall behind. And a lot of it has to do with failing to connect the dots between these initiatives, these programs, these trainings, and the business outcomes that are important to frontline leaders. And if you don't make that connection, it just starts to feel like extra work on top of the quote unquote real work. But when you can make that connection, it feels like part of getting the real work done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is an amazing quote for the power of coaching and integrating it within your processes and within your planning and scheduling so that it's not an extra on top. It's part of, of managing a team and managing yourself and your own career. Um, so, my last question is the signature question for this podcast. And Kevin, how do you unlock your own potential?
I like to think about it as a Venn diagram. And you might have seen versions of this, but I think about it as applying TLC to your own potential. And by TLC, I don't mean tender love and care. I mean talent, love, and commerce. So if you think about those as each being a circle, it's finding the thing that sets at the intersection of all three of those. So talent is asking and answering the question, what do you have the potential to be the best in the world at? It's a Jim Collins question. And then, what can you bring to the table or what can you contribute that 20,000 others would struggle to be able to contribute? So answering those questions will help you uncover the talent piece. And then there's the love piece, which is, what are you deeply passionate about? What can you see yourself investing 10,000 hours in and not getting bored? What are the things that at the very least you don't hate? Things that you don't feel like you have to do or you must do, but that you get to do them and you want to do them. And then finally, commerce. What are people actually willing to pay you to do? Where is there an actual need that you can fulfill? Even if it's not from a purely commercial point of view, is there something that you're doing to help improve others' lives? And finding something that sits at the intersection of all three of those. Because if you have all the love in the world for what you do, and there's a market for it, but you're not any good at it, that's a recipe for failure. If you have all the talent in the world and you love it, but there's no commercial enterprise associated with it, then it's just a hobby. And if you can make a lot of money at it and you're really good at it, but you don't like your job, then you're probably a lawyer or an investment banker. uh, when I was doing a lot more career coaching, I had a lot of attorney and investment banking clients. But the way I invest in my potential is by constantly reevaluating the degree to which I'm working at the center of those three things. And it's a constant calibration process because we change over time. What we love changes, what we're good at changes,
Yeah.
and where the market goes changes. So always staying on top of those things and doing my best to reorient when I go off track.
I love that you're walking the talk because I imagine, you work with your clients and whoever you're coaching internally or externally using this diagram, but you're applying it to yourself. And it takes a good degree of self understanding and self awareness to have that talent portion and what you love doing portion. So that introspection and self-awareness is probably the start of it all.
And that's why I have a coach, right? That's why you have to have, the self-awareness gets built in many ways when other people uncover those blind spots and those hidden talents that you didn't even know you had. And sometimes just the presence of another person can bring that out in you. And that's why I invest in my own development through hiring a coach and spending my time with coach-like leaders.
Absolutely. The coachee always needs a coach, and the coach always needs their own coach. Anyway, it's a layer to success. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Kevin. I really appreciated this informative and insightful chat.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on People Potential with Amanda. I appreciate each and every single listen and view. If you've enjoyed this content, it would really mean the world if you could leave us a 5-star review. This will make a huge impact in increasing the visibility of this podcast, on top of brightening the day of a few people here at Success Finder who work really hard behind the scenes to make this all happen. We're continuously working on new episodes, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a thing. Until next time, stay curious.